This is 6.5, and it's all about the just war theory. We're going to be looking at the just war theory today and trying to be able to explain it at the end so that we understand how Christians justify some wars as permissible. Hopefully, we're going to, by the end of this, know the main aspects of the just war theory, understand the criteria, and then be able to take that criteria and apply it to some actual wars. Imagine your head teacher has changed the rules about fighting in school. It's been decided that actually maybe a fight is the best way to sort out a problem. And so therefore, if that is the case, he wants to know, or she wants to know, 3 rules about when it would be okay to have a fight, and 3 rules about what is allowed to happen in a fight. So when's it okay? And once the fight has begun, what are the rules for fighting? Take a moment to do that now. Okay, let's move on. We're going to come back to that in a second. Now, we've looked already at Christianity and we've looked at warfare. So you should be able to have a think about this, ideally referring to scripture, referring to the Bible, about why Christians may not agree with going to war. Now, many Christians are pacifists, but many still fought in World War II. My granddad was a pacifist and he fought in World War II, drove a tank. Why do you think so many Christians stepped up and fought in World War II? Well, it's not an easy answer. There's many, many different reasons, but for many Christians, it was because of the evil that Hitler represented and the Nazi Party. And they felt it was only right to fight in response to that, even if it meant killing in a war context. If we take just war right back to its original roots, we're looking at a guy called Augustine, who talked about war being justified sometimes. This was taken up again later by this guy, Thomas Aquinas. He was a theologian in the 13th century, and he recognized that although killing was wrong, it seemed that sometimes the only way to fix a problem would be to go to war. Now, we looked at this moments ago, this concept of a head teacher allowing fights to occur in school. It's basically a much bigger scaled version of that. Rather than a head teacher, though, it's Thomas Aquinas, and he's saying actually wars are okay sometimes. They're justifiable sometimes. But he then goes on to talk about when it's okay to go to war, and then once the war has begun, how to fight in that war. This is effectively the just war theory. So let's pause there for a second. A couple of questions for you guys. What aspect of war does the just war theory cover? When do you think it would be acceptable for England to go to war? If never, explain why. And an extension on there, Jesus said, love your neighbor. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to go to war to protect them. Do you agree with that? Explain your answer. Take 5 minutes, pause it now, have a go at those. Okay, hopefully you've had a go at that now, and here's an opportunity to do some purple penning, do some marking of that. The 2 aspects of war that just war theory covers is when it's acceptable and how wars should be fought. There's lots of things you might write for this. You might say it's acceptable for England to go to war if we're under attack, if we were going to protect a weaker nation. You might think it's acceptable for us to go to war to gain more land for retaliation. Hopefully you've given a good explanation as to why, though. And then if you had to go at the extension, you might say that it is loving to protect those you love by fighting people who are trying to harm them, or you might disagree and say it's never loving to kill. A couple of ideas that. So, Thomas Aquinas, we know that there's this checklist that makes a war justifiable or not. This checklist is effectively becomes the just war theory. There's 6 criteria that make a war justifiable. I want to write these down. Here we go. Firstly, the war must have a just cause. So there needs to be a justified reason, a good reason to go to war. For example, for self-defense or to defend a weaker nation. But not retaliation. That wouldn't be seen as a just cause. The war must be declared by the correct authority. So the person who's in charge, legitimately, whichever government it is, that decision needs to be made by them. The intention of the war must be good. The intention of the war must be to defeat wrongdoing, to promote good, and the good achieved must outweigh the evil that gets you to that end goal. Fighting must be a last resort. You must have tried every single thing else, and it's got down to the last resort now, and all you've got left is war. There must be a reasonable chance of success as well. It's unethical, it's immoral to take a country to war if you think you're going to lose. That wouldn't be right. So you must have some chance of success. And finally, the methods that you use to fight the war must be proportional to achieve success. Excessive force should not be used. Don't take a gun to a knife fight. Take a moment now. I want you to draw a symbol for each of the just war criteria. And which do you think is the most important point of the criteria? Explain your answer. Which is the least important? Explain your answer. And would you add anything to this criteria and why? Pause there and have a go at those. We also know that it's not just about is the war acceptable to fight in. Once you get to war, it's not a case of anything goes. There's certain things you can and can't do in a war. So civilians cannot be targets of military operations. Torture is never allowed, and prisoners need to be treated humanely. That's the just war theory. Hopefully now you know the two aspects of it. You can understand the criteria of it. And now what I'd like to do is go and do some research. Find an example of a war that could be described as a just war, and find one that you think could not be described as a just war.